Welcome to Unfiltered with Sam. Today we'll be hosting Rabbi Yisroel Dovid Weiss, a groundbreaking guest for a podcast from my region. Before we get into the interview, I'd like to ask you all if you find the content of our new channel interesting, being it's produced right here in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East. Please like, subscribe, and share to help us reach more people. Your support really, really means a lot. So now off to our guest. Rabbi Yisroel Dovid Weiss is an American Haredi rabbi and a prominent spokesperson for Neturei Karta, an anti-Zionist Jewish group. The rabbi's short bio will be found in the interview description below. You will also be able to find the link to Neturei Karta's website in the interview description. I encourage you to visit their website where all your questions about Neturei Karta will be answered. Especially look at the links of the mission statement and the question and answer links. They offer clear and concise explanations to address most common doubts. So Rabbi Weiss, welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor and privilege to be on your channel, and especially being that it is focused in the Middle East, and of course, with God's help, inshallah, it goes throughout the world. So it's really critical, I hope, with God's help, that it will be understood and therefore help to remedy inshallah, the quagmire, this terrible bloodshed that we are seeing, that is ongoing at this moment.
Yeah. God willing, Rabbi, inshallah. I wanted, before we discuss the current situation, Rabbi, there were a few questions that I'd like to ask you about Neturei Karta, just to get them out in the open, because some people might not go directly to the link. So I wanted you to briefly please explain how Zionism differs from Judaism and why the existence of Israel is antithetical to Jewish beliefs.
Okay, so first I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message, and so, inshallah, sanctify His name and bring peace to the world. And Amen. And Assalamu alaikum again to all of you. The fact is that Judaism and Zionism are diametrically opposite. They are from we would say from the sky to the earth, from the day to night. It's so diametrically opposite that it's hard to comprehend anything more diametrically opposite. And basically, with God's help, I'll try, God should give me concise words to understand. Judaism is a religion of 3,000 years. Jews made a covenant with God on Mount Sinai 3,000 years ago to be subservient to Him and to uphold the laws of the Torah that God gave to Moshe Rabbeinu Moses on Mount Sinai 3,000 years. And we do practice that from that day to today exactingly. We are forbidden to defer to to in any way different, do anything different from the words of the Torah that was given to us. We apply our lives, whether how the technology changes and so forth, everything gets applied to the laws of the Torah, that we believe God created the world 6 days, the seventh He rested. Therefore, we're not allowed to work on the Sabbath, which is called the Shabbos, Sabbath. Jewish people are stringently commanded in the Ten Commandments to keep the Sabbath, not to work on the Sabbath. So one of the issues is not to use electric, which says we're not allowed to make fire on the Sabbath. We consider electric like fire. And therefore, when the technology kicked in and you have refrigerators and lights and everything, how that applies to the laws of the Torah, that we're not allowed to open lights or do things on the Shabbos or drive in cars and so forth. So our rabbis took every new development and used all their knowledge and their capabilities to understand how we apply our lives. Not that the Torah will change according to the times, but on the contrary, how we change our lives, or we apply our lives, or that it should conform to the laws of the Torah. It has to conform to the laws of the Torah. So as I say, the example is electric. When electric came out and light bulbs, so the rabbis around the world got together and they decided that you're not allowed to open lights on Shabbos because it is considered electric. I'm just giving one of the many examples. Zionism is a movement that started 140 years ago. It's an ideology of creating a national home. And this is a totally materialistic nationalist concept of making a national home, which be a country like other countries, a people like other people, and it has totally removing God from the equation. It's a purely nationalist movement. Now, so you have here the different concepts altogether that you can see it's totally a different issue. Judaism is subservience to God, upholding the laws of the Torah. Zionism totally ignores the laws of the Torah. They're bombing in Lebanon. They're bombing in everything. I mean, Sabbath is by them nothing. The cars are driving back and forth on the Sabbath. Everything is going on the Sabbath as if it would be any other day of the week, because God has nothing to do. It's taken out of the equation. That is certain. And it was never to be other. It was never another concept. The Zionist leadership, Ben Gurion, Theodor Herzl, all these people had nothing with God. On the contrary, they despised God, they despised religion, ridiculed religion, and in fact, they spewed constantly heresy and blasphemy by saying, "Where was God to protect us in the last 1,000 years or 2,000 years of our exile, and therefore we have to have a gun to protect us." So they ridicule the religious person who looks to God for protection. So in rather than looking at God as the ruler of the world, their concept of rulership is how more powerful they can have, how many more guns they can have, and so it's a purely contradictory movement to Judaism. That's in its essence. It's based on blasphemy. It's based on uprooting every concept from a Jewish soul, his closeness to God, and rather make him cold and and a nationalist concept. Your savior is in donating to UJA, United Jewish Fund. That's what the whole concept. You'll save your soul by doing that. So that's the essence. But it happens to be that in the laws of the Torah, God made a covenant. We made a covenant with God 3,000 years ago, and God told us that we have to go up to the Holy Land. And at that time, anybody who didn't worship idols were allowed to remain in the Holy Land according to God. That was the concept. And we were warned by the prophets. Anybody who studies Judaism, anybody who takes a little time and effort, will look at the prophets, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, all the prophets. They warned the Jews that if we're not on that high level of spirituality, then we will be sent into exile. And that happened 2,000 years ago with the destruction of King Solomon's temple. Then there was a second temple. It was destroyed. And we were warned at that time that God, the Almighty, who rules the world, said, you were dispersed in exile amongst all the nations because of our sins, not because we didn't have a Patriot missile or whatever, not because we didn't have guns or Uzis. It was because we were not spiritually on that level required. Therefore, we were dispersed amongst the nations. And as a Jewish people, we are expressly forbidden to re-establish any concept of a Jewish sovereignty, of a Jewish kingdom, of a Jewish nation. We're a nation as a people, but not to create a national home or anything. That's expressly forbidden. That's already 2,000 years ago. And Jews who are true to the Torah always respected the words of God. So although we went through relatively sort of recently, like a few hundred years ago, the Crusades, where they tried to forcefully convert the Jews in the Inquisition to Christianity. Jews let themselves be burnt at the stake and everything to uphold the Torah, our covenant with God, that we should not convert out of our religion. At the same time, we never, although we went through so many hardships, we never attempted to establish a Jewish national home, because that is understood by us that we are in exile as a decree of God. We are never to attempt to somehow bypass that and create our own state. Now, we do believe, a basic Jewish belief is that there will be a time when the Messiah, Mashiach, will come, where all humanity, God will reveal his glory, where all humanity will serve God in harmony. That doesn't mean everybody will become Jewish. No, it'll just mean that there will be a recognition of God, where all humanity will serve God. At that time, God will build a temple, and everybody, all the nations will come together and serve God in peace. That's what we pray and hope for. Our purpose of life is to sanctify the name of God. In other words, although we are in exile, I'm in the United States. There are Jews who are living many years in Lebanon. There are Jews who are living in every part of the world. Our purpose is to uphold the laws of the Torah, to sanctify God's name. The pinnacle of that will be when God will reveal his glory, all humanity will serve God in peace and harmony, and God will reveal his glory and build a temple. It will be the will of all humanity. Again, not that people will become Jewish. The Jewish people will continue their covenant, and the rest of the world will do, as long as they will recognize the one God. There will stop being any atheists, and that's what we believe the future will bring. Now, we were never deemed a threat by the Muslim world. Why? Because the Muslim world, who are full of scholars, their leadership is scholars, and many of their people, it's contrary to what the world portrays, and they know that Judaism does not aspire to take land away from the people of Palestine or the people of any other Muslim country. Anyway, we're not a danger. We have a distinctly different religion than Islam, but we can coexist. We believe in one God, and it is never an impediment to coexistence. So basically, you have Judaism is a religion, Zionism is a nationalist goal, and they totally transgress and they breach the laws that God says that Jews are forbidden to create a Jewish nation. Now, they're not a Jewish nation, mind you. They're a farce. They're a nationalist, selfish, flawed nationhood, but they refer to themselves as a Jewish nation. They use the Star of David. They use the name Israel, which is Jacob, but they're nothing with Judaism. They're against Judaism, but yet they use this as a facade to legitimize their occupation of Palestine. But it happens to be directly rebelling of the laws of God that says, don't make a Jewish nation, even if it would have been kosher or halal or something. It's unacceptable. Now, let me just add I'll try to be very concise. It happens to be that when we were sent into exile, we were under 3 oaths of God 2,000 years ago. It's the words of King Solomon and repeated in the Jewish law books. That we are under 3 oaths. One, not to return en masse. We're forbidden. God put us into exile, that we should be dispersed amongst the nations and serve God as godly people, hopefully. But we are not to return, to attempt to return and en masse, in large numbers. Secondly, not to rebel against any nation. We have to be loyal citizens. A Jew is living in Lebanon, a Jew is living in the United States, a Jew living in Canada or Iran, whatever it may be. We have to pray for the well-being of the country and be loyal citizens, not to rebel against the nations. Thirdly, we're not to make any attempt to end exile in any shape or form. Zionism breaches every concept of Judaism. They claim they're making a Jewish state. Contrary to the Jewish law, they are rebelling against the nations. They are going up in masses to the Holy Land, and as I say, they're killing and stealing, which is basics of altogether of Judaism. That God, the laws of the Torah is that we are to emulate God, just as God is compassionate. You must be compassionate, and you're not allowed to kill or steal. We're not allowed to do harm to people. So they're killing. Their state is, besides breaching the laws of exile, it's created through killing and stealing and occupying other people. That's the basics of the Torah, not to kill or steal. And just like the cherry on top, I will just add one more thing. Jewish people are required to show gratitude to good done to them, to kindness done to them. In the last hundreds of years, the Jews were hounded and harassed in Europe and murdered. There was, as I say, the Inquisition and Crusades. And at that time, there was the Islamic countries, and the Islamic countries actually embraced the Jewish people. It happens to be including the Ottoman Empire that allowed the Jews and took the Jews into Palestine and Palestine, whatever and so we were embraced in all the Arab and Muslim countries. We flourished amongst them with a distinctly different religion, without any United Nations or anything. And so therefore, again, clearly the difference difference of religion was never an impediment to peace. On the contrary, it was the Islamic countries that took us in. Now, have the Zionists come in order to solidify their occupation? They use a narrative of vilifying the people of the Islamic people, vilifying the Muslims, vilifying the people of Palestine, and saying that they're anti-Semitic, they hate Jewish people. There could be nothing more disgusting, repugnant as doing that. When you're talking about a people we should be doing them a kindness and lauding for their and showing gratitude for the good done to us, that we were taken in and we were able to flourish in these last hundreds of years. Instead, the Zionists decided to give with the swipe of the pen to declare them persona non grata, that they're anti-Semitic and they're also against Christians and they hate people and they're inhumane. Therefore, in every aspect, we as a Jew and around the world, the ones who are true to Jewish religion stand in the most vociferous and strong opposition to the occupation of Palestine, the creation of the state of Israel, and all the actions that emanate from them, and the horrific that culminated, that we're witnessing in these last over a year, the mass murder of the people of Gaza and Lebanon. Our hearts are full of tears, our hearts are full of frustration, and we simply try around the world, including in Jerusalem, the very religious communities, to stand up and speak up and cry for the people of Gaza, now the people of Lebanon.
Thank you for that analysis, Rabbi. Thank you. Very, very informative. You touched upon the historical aspects and clarified a lot of things for people from my background and my area. But Rabbi, I wanted to ask you on that. I mean, given that Zionism intensified in part as a reaction to the Holocaust, how would you respond to critics who argue that a Jewish state was necessary to provide the sanctuary and safety for the Jews, especially given, Europe's record of persecution? And in your view, what would have been an ideal solution to the plight of the European Jews before and after the Holocaust then?
Yeah, with the help of the Almighty, it's very ironic that my name is Yisroel, Rabbi Yisroel Dovid Weiss. Yisroel is Israel, the pronunciation name. So they stolen my name to create their state. My name originates from Jacob, whose second name was Israel, Yisroel. It's pronounced in English Israel, but it's Yisroel. And they attempt to steal our identity, the Judaism, and they try to use concepts of different historical issues in order to buttress and to support their occupation and to intimidate voices that are opposing them. So the Holocaust is one of their major weapons that they use. Now it happens to be in that issue, I myself am a child of a person who escaped the Nazis. My father, a blessed memory, and his parents were killed in Auschwitz. So we live and breathe the Holocaust. The majority of my parents' families are both from Poland and Hungary. My father is Hungarian for generations. My mother is Polish for generations. She was born in Hungary, but Polish. And the majority of the families were all murdered by the Nazis, as the majority of our communities were murdered. As I said, my father was, God helped that he was able to escape when the Nazis entered Hungary. So basically, we live and breathe the Holocaust. We feel it. I grew up. I was born like 11 years after the Holocaust. I grew up with the people who survived the Holocaust. Many who had tattoos in their hands, numbers that was burnt into their hands as identification, like animals. That was my father-in-law was in Auschwitz, actually, of blessed memory, and he used to. Constantly through his life, he would scream out in sleep with the nightmares of the Holocaust. But basically, so we live and breathe the Holocaust. The Holocaust was a fact of anti-Semitism. Hitler and the Nazis, they wanted to totally eradicate the Jewish people. Now, the world actually went and they made many issues to remember that we should not forget what happened by the Holocaust, in order, not only because to remember the wrong that was done, but that it should not be repeated. The Holocaust is a fact of trying to eradicate another people. And the Zionists went, and although it is, I suppose it would be a show for itself, but it happens to be that during by the Holocaust, the beginning of the Holocaust, at that time, the Zionists working in Germany actually colluded with the Nazis. And we have many books. We have a book called The Holocaust Victims Accused. The Zionist organization wanted Jews to go up to their land that they wanted to create in Palestine, and they colluded with the Nazis. The Nazis wanted to throw out the Jews from Germany, and they colluded together. And the rabbis, we have many writings, and we have a lot of these historical facts that the Nazis and the Zionists worked together. Later, the Zionists actually thwarted the efforts of the Jewish rabbis, who actually secretly approached the Nazi leadership. We have there's books about that. There's the documentation of that. How from Hungary itself, our rabbis, there was Rabbi Weiss of blessed memory, who secretly approached Eichmann, the Eichmann trials. They secretly opposed his henchmen, and they said, if you know the history of the Holocaust, the Nazis went from country to country, and in 1944, basically, they came into they wanted to go to invade Hungary and a part of Czechoslovakia, Slovakia. They wanted and they were going to murder the rest of the Jews there. Now, the writing on the wall was seen. Everybody saw what's happening. So the rabbis tried to secretly approach them, and basically he said to the Nazi leadership, to Eichmann, he said, "Look, the writing on the wall is that you're going to lose this war now. So you need money. You need a lot of money and things. It was buy the Jews, sell the Jews to us instead of killing them. We'll give you money, and you should not kill the Jews in Hungary. You should leave us alone." And they made a secret deal, and for like a month or two period, they stopped gassing and killing the Jews in Auschwitz, and this was documented. And on the condition that Rabbi Weissmandl, secretly was going to send money to the Nazis. Now, what happened was the Zionists mixed into this, and they thwarted the efforts of Rabbi Weissmandl. There's a book called Perfidy from Ben Hecht written about this. Rabbi Weissmandl wrote a book called Min HaMetzer, From the Depth. He lived through the war. He was almost murdered, and the Zionists saw that he should get arrested. The Zionists felt that the more the Jews are going to be murdered, that eventually to the victor goes the spoils. The more the Jews are going to be later, the victor, the allies will give the Jews compensation, and they'll be able to get land over there. So they said the more that the blood is spilt, the more they'll be able to say it's unbelievable. And we have, as I say, we have their writings. We put out a book called The Traditional Torah: Opposition to Zionism, where we have documents of the anti-Zionists. We have documents of the Zionists. Now, a little bit I'll show you later. But basically, the Holocaust was we don't understand the ways of God, but everything is from God. We do not question God. And but the Jews were murdered, millions and millions of people, 6 million more, we even believe, because whatever, I met with people from Russia, it was undocumented. The Jews were murdered. They were murdered because they were Jews. But that, in no manner, shape, or form, gives the right to the Jewish people to go and take the land from another people. Now, the world was silent at the time of the extermination of the Jews, but the Jewish people suffered because they were Jewish. And what we do with our rabbis, the remnants of the Jewish people try to collect themselves together and become stronger in their faith, recognizing and strengthening our belief there is a God. We don't understand his ways, but we know that whenever there's a punishment of God, we look to look at our failures and see what we have to do to become closer to God and to correct what we've done, that why the Almighty brought about this, terrible destruction. And we have to better ourselves and become closer to God. The Zionists took this concept of the Holocaust, and instead of being closer to God, they ridiculed the Jewish people who are saying we look to God for protection, and we have to be closer to our religion. They say, you looked to God for protection? Look what happened. So you have to totally ridicule God and say that he can't protect you. And the result is we have to have a gun to protect ourselves. In other words, from one side of their mouth, they're clearly speaking heresy and blasphemy and saying that God isn't there to protect you, and therefore we have to use a gun. We have to totally forsake God. At the other side, they tell the world, they roll their eyes and put on this pious facade and say to the world, oh, God gave us the land. It's given to us by God. It says so in the Bible. So one side, they laugh at God and they say God isn't and on the second side, they tell the world that you dare not oppose us because it's given by God. Now, the rabbis around the world, we put out a book called The Rabbis Speak Out, which is a compilation of 100, here it says it's 10 years old, 130 years record of religious opposition to Zionism. Well, we have all the rabbis in Europe. The Zionists came from Europe. And they all, around the world, this is a compilation of the leading rabbis of the world rabbis who stood up and they said, excuse me, you guys, you are heretics. You are not speaking in the name of our religion. The religion does not permit us to go and occupy and create a state. You're using the Holocaust as an excuse. They're using the Holocaust as an excuse to occupy land. And they're also using the silence of the world by the Holocaust, because the world was silent at the time. They did not take in the Jews, even America, the United States. They refused entry to the Jews when they were trying to escape. So they're using the guilt feeling of the world, and they say, hey, the Zionists come, they use it as a weapon. They say, oh, you see, you were silent at the world, now dare not be silent when we're creating our state. On the contrary, you have guilt feelings and you sympathize with the Jewish suffering, help us create the state. Now, by doing that, they're manipulating and using the suffering of the Jews by the Holocaust in order to create this state of Israel, ignoring the people of Palestine that are suffering, and the world, if they dare to think that they should say a word about this, then they know they'll be able to accuse them of insensitivity to the Jewish suffering by the Holocaust. So they constantly use the Holocaust, remember the Holocaust, because they want that anybody who dares speak up about what are you doing to the people of Palestine, they'll say, what you forgot about the Holocaust? You forgot about the Holocaust? They use the Holocaust, and now, so remember what we're dealing here. God tells us in the Torah, do not create a state. Do not rebel against nations. Do not kill or steal. So we Jews, who are the ashes, we rose out of the ashes of the Holocaust, we're trying to regroup and keep the words of the Torah, our religion, the remnants, the children of the survivors. So instead of keeping the words of the Torah, they say, forsake God, ignore God, make a state that's a rebellion against God. So it's so ironic and so it's so hurtful that instead of taking the Holocaust and saying, Hitler tried to kill us, Hitler tried to eradicate Judaism, we're trying to rebuild and do what's right to God, and they're saying, the Holocaust happened, now we're going to spit in the face of God and create a state that's expressly forbidden. So the rabbi said no. In fact, let me just quote the chief rabbi of Palestine, who was, remember, there was a community that was existing in Palestine for hundreds of years. And they were God-fearing community. They lived together with the Palestinian people, with the Christian and Muslim people in the same courtyards, with a difference of religion. It was never an impediment to peaceful coexistence. This is how our lives were. We lived together. We babysat each other's children. This is Judaism. And you look at the history. If anybody really studies history in the 1800s and the 1900s, we lived together. We lived together up until the advent of Zionism. And there was no problem, even with the difference of religion. So now, and not only that, but the community of the Jews living there were very God-fearing, because nobody went up to Palestine. Palestine wasn't the place you went up to become rich. It was people who searched spirituality. So the Jewish community living there was a very God-fearing community. And they were strongly anti this of Zionists that came along that were created by basically atheists. So these Jewish people, when the Zionists came along, they said, no, we don't want this. We don't want this movement. And here you see the chief rabbi in 1947 already, this is going through like skipping fast through the history of the 1890s, 1900s, when the Zionists started making their kibbutzim and things. But here you had in the this is 1947, a year before the United Nations ratified the State of Israel. The chief rabbi of the community was Rabbi Dushinsky of blessed memory. He was the head of the Ashkenazi community, once from Europe. There was a Sephardic rabbi also an anti-Zionist. And this is what he stated to the United Nations. We furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. This was a declaration before the United Nations, July 16, 1947. It's in the United Nations documents. And they were ignored. They were ignored because the Zionists' power was started in Europe, and they were close with Britain when the Britain had the mandate. Britain gave them the Balfour Declaration and so forth. They gave them control. They gave them the control. Afterwards, he passed on. You can see the gathering, the tens of thousands of Jews on the streets in Jerusalem when they took up another chief rabbi. And these are all anti-Zionists. You can see this is in front of the White House when Netanyahu came to visit Bibi Netanyahu. Came to visit President Obama then. And we always have this. We continually have these large demonstrations. They're in the streets of the United States in front of the Capitol. The Jewish community around the world, the ones who are true to the religion, not the non-religious or the peripherally religious, what they call modern Orthodox, the ones who make compromises in their religion. The very religious, whether it's living in the streets of Jerusalem and Al-Quds or the United States. I'm in New York, the largest community outside of Jerusalem, and right across from Manhattan, Williamsburg, Brooklyn. There's not one Israeli flag, not one. You're talking about tens of thousands of Jews living there, not one Israeli flag. And the reason is simply because we are practicing our religion, which is very extremely expensive and so forth. We have to pay for private education and so forth. We do not support and we oppose the state of Israel. Why? If it would be critical to our religion, we would be the first to support it. But you find that the very religious, we all oppose the state of Israel because it's totally contradictory. It's a rebellion against God, killing and stealing and so forth. So that's the Jewish view. Now the Holocaust, again, let's understand, getting back to your original question, the Holocaust is a terrible catastrophe that happened to the Jewish people. But it is something that we have to understand why God made that happen. But you can't use that as a tool to rebel against God and say, therefore, I'm going to rebel against God and say that God doesn't rule the world and we're going to create a state that's directly in contradiction to the commands of God not to make a Jewish state and to kill and steal. But in order to accomplish the state, we're going to kill and totally ignore the lives of the Palestinian people. And therefore, the very religious said, excuse me, we suffered the Holocaust. We are the children of the Holocaust. Don't come to us and use self-pity and all your other ploys of being able to stifle the voices of the world by using the words Holocaust. It's repugnant. It's unacceptable. My grandparents died because they were Jews, and now you're using their blood, their ashes, in order to rebel against God and kill the Palestinians and take over the land and totally dismiss our connection to God. It's unacceptable, and we will never be silent about the Holocaust. We live, as I say, and talk about the Holocaust. It's our relatives, the majority of our families were killed by the Holocaust, but it's we have to be closer to God, not rebel against God. So that's the question of the Holocaust. What are Jews to do since the Holocaust? Or say, well, you see Jews that what the Zionists say that, you see Jews have to have some type of a home or something. That's not true. We never question God. God is the ruler of the whole world. We can live any part of the world. It's God. If God wanted us to have a state, he would tell us to have a state. God does not say that you should create a state, and certainly not by killing or stealing. He says that he rules the world, and he gives He gives life, he gives to breathe. Every human being is living and breathing with the billions of DNA that's going through our body. It's because there's a ruler to the world. The world is working on clockwork through the hands of God. A child is born and lives and breathes his whole life. The whole world is miraculous. It's because there's a God who's ruling the world, and he wants us dispersed amongst the nations in order, actually, we believe that one of the purposes of our exile is that ideally, if we would be serving God, that we would be showing how a person should act of kindness to emulate God and to keep the words of God, to show people how to be close to God and not to become Jewish. We're not looking at that, but simply to be good and kindness and to emulate the holiness of God. To create a state, that is wrong. That is a rebellion against God. We can live around the world, in Russia, in America, in Lebanon, in any part of the world, and serve God as God wants us to do. And that's why my parents and of blessed memory and Jews moved to Europe, they moved to England, they moved to the United States, to Canada, and so on. And we are living, and we have beautiful communities that are serving God. And yes, even in Palestine, the Jewish community lived together with the Palestinians and served God in exile. We're not trying to leave the godly command in exile. It's impossible to do so.
Thank you, Rabbi, for that.